My mind started racing, replaying conversations, re-examining inconsistencies I had previously brushed aside. The expensive new patio furniture Mom had claimed was a, quote, gift from a neighbor. The weekend trips to Amish country they'd started taking, explained away as necessary relaxation for Dad's stress levels. Mikey's brand new, top-of-the-line drone he'd shown off on his last video call, supposedly bought with money from a, quote, big freelance project that never seemed to materialize. It couldn't be. Could it? Could they really have lied to me, not just about the severity of Dad's illness, but about the entire need for my financial support? The thought was so monstrous, so deeply cynical, that I almost couldn't entertain it. Almost. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in years. Driven by a gnawing unease, I logged into the online portal for the joint bank account I still shared with my parents, the account into which my monthly support payments were deposited. I hadn't looked at the detailed transaction history in ages, trusting their vague assurances that the money was going towards bills and medical expenses. My hands were shaking as I clicked on View Statements. I started with the most recent month and began to scroll. Utilities, mortgage payment, groceries. Okay, normal. Then, a charge for $300 at the Gilded Lily Spa. A charge for $500 at Vintage Vines Wine Shop. A recurring monthly payment of $150 to Elite Golf Club membership. My breath hitched. I kept scrolling back, month after month, year after year. The pattern was horrifyingly clear. Mixed in with the legitimate household expenses was a steady stream of non-essential, often luxurious, spending. Spa treatments, expensive dinners out, online shopping sprees at high-end clothing stores. And then there were the transfers, regular, significant transfers directly into Mikey's personal bank account, often labeled simply support or art supplies. My $1,000 a month wasn't just keeping them afloat. It was funding their comfortable lifestyle and subsidizing my brother's perpetual failure to launch. My father's fragile health wasn't a medical crisis. It was a brilliantly executed, long-term emotional blackmail scheme. I felt a wave of nausea so intense I thought I might pass out. The betrayal wasn't just financial. It was a deep, profound violation of trust, of love, of the very foundation of our family. 5 years, $70,000. Countless sacrifices, all built on a lie. I didn't call them. I didn't scream. I just sat there, in the quiet of my New York apartment, surrounded by the evidence of their deception, and felt a cold, hard anger crystallize in my chest. The kind of anger that doesn't shout, it calculates. I needed proof, irrefutable proof. The golf photo, the bank statements. They were damning, but my mother was a master manipulator. She could twist anything, create a plausible explanation, paint me as the paranoid, ungrateful daughter. I needed something concrete, something undeniable. I booked a flight to Ohio for the following weekend, using a different airline, flying into a smaller regional airport an hour away from my hometown. I told my parents I had a last-minute work trip to Chicago and wouldn't be able to visit for a few more weeks. Then, I rented a car under a different name and drove towards the town I grew up in, my heart pounding with a mixture of dread and determination. It was time to pay my family a surprise visit. I parked my rental car 2 blocks away from my parents' house and walked the rest of the way, my nerves jangling. It felt surreal, sneaking up on my own childhood home like a private investigator. It was a Saturday afternoon, sunny and warm for early spring. As I approached, I heard the unmistakable sound of a lawnmower. I peeked around the corner of the neighbor's hedge, and there he was, my father, not resting indoors, not carefully monitoring his heart rate. He was pushing a heavy, gas-powered lawnmower across the front yard, whistling cheerfully, his face flushed with exertion, but looking perfectly, infuriatingly healthy. He finished a row, wiped his brow with the back of his hand, and then bent down to effortlessly yank a stubborn weed from the flower bed. The man my mother claimed could barely walk to the mailbox without getting winded was doing vigorous yard work. I ducked back behind the hedge before he could see me, my heart pounding, a bitter metallic taste in my mouth. It was true. All of it. The fragile invalid was a performance. I waited until he went inside, then circled around to the back of the house. The kitchen window was open slightly. I crept closer, positioning myself behind the large lilac bush my grandmother had planted years ago. I could hear voices from inside, my mother and Mikey. Absolutely needs the new Mac Studio for his video editing, my mother was saying, her voice laced with its usual indulgent tone. The processing power is essential for his art, dear. I know, Mom, Mikey replied, his voice a familiar, entitled whine. But where are we gonna get the cash? Megan's been weird lately, asking questions about the budget. Don't you worry about your sister, Mom said dismissively. "She's just stressed with her fancy New York job. I'll handle her." I told her Dad had a little setback last week. Another $1,000 should do it for the down payment on the Mac. My blood ran cold. They weren't just lying. They were actively planning the next phase of the scam, casually discussing how to extract more money from me using my father's fake illness as leverage. "Are you sure she'll send it?" Mikey asked, a note of anxiety in his voice. "Of course she will, darling," Mom said confidently. "She always does. She feels guilty living so far away. It's the least she can do for her poor sick father." I couldn't listen anymore. I felt sick, dizzy with rage and betrayal. I stumbled back from the window, away from the house, back towards my rental car, my mind reeling. I needed more than just overheard conversations. I needed concrete proof of the financial deception, something they couldn't deny or explain away. I drove to a nearby coffee shop, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. How could I get that proof? Breaking into their house felt wrong, risky. But then I remembered something. My dad, the meticulous accountant, had always kept a detailed household ledger. Not on a computer, but in an old-fashioned, cloth-bound book he updated by hand every single month. He was obsessive about it. He tracked every penny in, every penny out. He'd kept it for as long as I could remember, stored in the bottom drawer of the antique secretary desk in their living room. If that ledger still existed, and if he had been honest in his entries, a big if I now realized, it would contain the undeniable truth of where my money had actually gone. I knew my parents always went out for dinner and a movie every Saturday night, a routine they hadn't broken in 20 years. I drove back to their neighborhood around 7 p.m. and parked down the street, waiting. Sure enough, at 7:30, their car pulled out of the driveway. My heart pounding, I walked quickly to the house. I still had my old house key on my keychain, another oversight on their part. Letting myself into the dark, silent house felt like a violation, but I pushed the feeling down. I went straight to the secretary desk, in the living room. The bottom drawer was locked, as always, but I knew where Dad kept the tiny antique key, taped underneath the roll-top cover. My fingers fumbled with the small key, my breath held tight in my chest. The lock clicked open. I pulled the drawer out slowly, and there it was. The familiar, worn, blue cloth-bound ledger. I carried it over to the dim light of the hallway lamp and opened it. My dad's neat, precise handwriting filled the pages. Columns for income, columns for expenses. I flipped to 5 years ago, the month I started sending the money. There was my $1,000 transfer, dutifully recorded under Income, Megan. Then I looked at the expense columns for that month. Mortgage, utilities, groceries, a small copay for Dad's actual doctor visit after his collapse. It all seemed legitimate. I flipped forward a few months. Still mostly normal expenses. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe Mom was just exaggerating, spending a little extra here and there. Then I got to the entries from about 6 months after Dad's initial health scare. And the numbers started to change. Under expenses, new categories appeared. Asterisk Mikey, art supplies minus $300. Asterisk Mikey, studio rent minus $500. Asterisk weekend getaway minus $600. Asterisk spa day, Mom minus $250. Asterisk. I kept flipping. Faster now, my initial shock turning into a cold, hard fury. Page after page revealed the truth. My $1,000 a month, sometimes more when I sent extra for the fake emergencies, wasn't just covering basic necessities. It was funding everything. Mikey's rent for an art studio I now suspected was just a glorified man cave. My mother's regular spa visits and shopping trips. Their weekend trips. Even cash withdrawals simply labeled M expense or D expense. And the medical bills? They were practically non-existent after the first year. A few small copays here and there. Nothing that would justify the constant narrative of crippling medical debt. It was all a lie. The ledger, in my father's own meticulous hand, was the irrefutable proof. I pulled out my phone and, with shaking hands, took clear, well-lit photographs of every single page for the past 5 years. Dozens of photos. Evidence. Then, just as I was about to put the ledger back, something else caught my eye, tucked into the back pocket of the book. It was a folded piece of paper. A financial statement from a brokerage account I didn't know existed. It was in my parents' names, and the balance was staggering. Over $150,000. Money market funds, blue chip stocks. Where had this come from? Then I saw the transaction history. Small, regular deposits over the past 4 years, coinciding almost exactly with the times I had sent Time's money for those fabricated medical emergencies. They hadn't just been spending my money. They had been investing it. Building a secret nest egg while crying poverty to me. That was the final, brutal twist of the knife. It wasn't just about subsidizing Mikey. It was about systematically defrauding me to build their own comfortable future, all while keeping me trapped in a cycle of guilt and financial sacrifice. I carefully put the ledger back, locked the drawer, and replaced the key. I let myself out of the house, my mind numb, the weight of the evidence heavy on my phone and in my heart. As I drove away, I didn't feel sadness. I didn't feel anger anymore. I just felt cold and incredibly dangerously clear-headed. The campaign was about to begin. Back in New York, armed with the photographic evidence from the ledger and the brokerage statement, I felt like a different person. The fog of guilt and obligation had lifted, replaced by the sharp, invigorating clarity of righteous anger. My marketing brain kicked into high gear. This wasn't just a family dispute anymore. It was a crisis management situation. Their crisis, orchestrated by Naimayi. My first step was to build my narrative and gather my allies. I knew confronting my parents and Mikey directly would be pointless. They would deny, deflect, and gaslight. I needed to control the story before they could spin it. My name is Megan, I'm 32, and up until about 6 months ago, my life revolved around two things: my marketing career in New York City and the constant, low-grade hum of anxiety about my dad's fragile health back home in Ohio. For 5 years, I'd been the dutiful daughter, the financial first responder, pouring a significant chunk of my hard-earned salary into the black hole of my parents' finances, all supposedly to cover my dad's mounting medical bills from a serious heart condition. I put my own dreams on ice, buying an apartment, traveling, even seriously dating, because family, especially a sick parent, came first, right? Turns out, the only thing sick was the elaborate lie they'd constructed. My dad wasn't dying. He was playing golf 3 times a week. The medical bills? Non-existent. My money, tens of thousands of dollars, wasn't paying for cardiologists. It was funding my younger brother's perpetual adolescence and my parents' surprisingly comfortable early retirement. They didn't just lie to me, they weaponized my love, my guilt, my sense of duty, all to keep the gravy train rolling for my sensitive, perpetually struggling brother Mikey. When I accidentally stumbled onto the truth, hidden in plain sight during a surprise visit home, they didn't crumble in shame. They doubled down. They gaslit me. They threatened me. They tried to make comfortable the villain for daring to question their narrative. They forgot who they were dealing with. I manage multi-million-dollar marketing campaigns designed to influence perception. I know how to control a narrative. And I decided it was time to launch a new campaign, Operation Consequences. This is the story of how I went from being their safety net to the reason their whole world unraveled. Growing up, our family wasn't dramatic. It was just imbalanced, like a scale permanently tilted to one side. That side was Mikey. My brother, 4 years younger, was born with a seemingly inexhaustible supply of charm and an equally inexhaustible aversion to responsibility. He was the creative one, the sensitive soul, the kid who could talk his way out of any trouble and into any favor. If he broke a neighbor's window playing baseball, it was because his, quote, passion for the game was just too strong. If he failed a test, the teacher just didn't get his unique way of thinking. My parents, particularly my mom, bought into his act hook, line, and sinker. I was the other one. The practical one. The quiet, studious daughter who got good grades, followed the rules, and learned early on that my achievements were expected, while Mikey's mere existence was celebrated. I got scholarships for college. They took out loans for Mikey's brief, disastrous attempt at film school. He dropped out after 1 semester, declaring it too commercial. I worked my butt off after graduation, climbing the ladder at a competitive marketing agency in Chicago, then jumped at a chance to move to New York for a bigger role. Mikey was finding himself. This usually involved sleeping on my parents' couch, playing video games, and occasionally working gig jobs that never lasted more than a few weeks. My parents enabled him with a devotion that baffled me. "He just needs time, Megan," my mom would say whenever I gently suggested Mikey might benefit from, say, contributing to the household expenses. "He feels things so deeply. The pressure just gets to him." My dad, a retired accountant who should have known better, just sighed and went along with it. The dynamic shifted into high gear about 5 years ago. I was 27, finally hitting my stride in NYC, starting to save seriously for a down payment on an apartment. That's when my mom called, her voice choked with tears. "It's your father," she sobbed. "He collapsed. They think it's his heart." I dropped everything and flew back to Ohio immediately. My dad had suffered what the doctors called a significant cardiac event. He hadn't had a full heart attack, but the tests revealed serious underlying coronary artery disease. He needed medication, lifestyle changes, and regular, expensive monitoring. He was okay, relatively speaking, but the prognosis was uncertain. The doctor used phrases like chronic condition and ongoing management. The fear was real, but looking back, I can see how my mother immediately seized the narrative. She painted a picture of imminent fragility, of my father living on borrowed time. "The stress nearly killed him, Megan," she whispered dramatically at his hospital bedside. "The worry about money, it's just too much for his heart." Mikey, of course, was devastated, in his own way. He spent about 10 minutes looking pale and concerned at the hospital before declaring the atmosphere too depressing and retreating back to his video games, leaving me and Mom to handle the doctors, the insurance paperwork, and the dawning financial panic. Dad's insurance was decent, but it didn't cover everything. There were co-pays, deductibles, expensive medications. My mother, who hadn't worked outside the home in years, went into full-blown crisis mode. "We're going to lose the house, Megan," she cried one night over the phone. "Your father can't handle this stress. It will kill him." And just like that, the guilt hook was set deep. How could I, the successful daughter, living it up in the big city, not step in? How could I focus on saving for an apartment when my parents were facing financial ruin and my dad's health was supposedly hanging by a thread? "Don't worry, Mom," I said, the words feeling like a heavy weight. "I'll help. We'll figure it out." Figure it out meant me. I started sending money home. $1,000 a month, automatically transferred from my account to theirs. It was a huge chunk of my income, forcing me to drastically scale back my own life. No more dinners out with friends, no more weekend trips, no new clothes. My apartment savings goal evaporated. But every time I felt a pang of resentment, I pictured my dad, his face pale in the hospital bed, and I told myself it was the right thing to do. Mikey, naturally, was exempt from contributing. "He's too stressed about Dad," Mom explained. "And he's trying to get his graphic design freelance work off the ground. He needs to focus." His freelance work seemed to consist mainly of designing posters for his friend's band, and occasionally updating his Instagram portfolio with moody black and white photos. For the first year, the arrangement seemed straightforward. The money I sent ostensibly covered medical bills and helped keep them afloat while Dad recovered. He did seem to recover, remarkably well in fact. His color came back. He started taking walks. He even started doing some light consulting work from home. But the narrative of his fragile health persisted, perpetuated mostly by my mother. "He looks good, but the doctor says his numbers are still concerning," she'd tell me in hushed tones whenever I visited. "We have to be so careful not to upset him." Upsetting him, I soon learned, meant any discussion about tightening their budget or, God forbid, Mikey getting a real job. Then the requests for extra money started. "Megan, honey, Dad needs a new specialized heart monitor. Insurance won't cover it. It's $1,500. I sent the money. "Sweetie, the copay for Dad's new medication is outrageous. Almost $800 this month." I sent the money. "Nicole, Mikey's laptop died. He needs it for his design work, to help support us. Could you possibly float him a loan for a new one?" I sent the money, knowing full well it was unlikely to be repaid. Each request was wrapped in the gauze of my father's health. How could I say no? How could I prioritize my own savings over my dad's well-being? I felt trapped. My love and sense of duty weaponized against me. My own life became a holding pattern. I worked relentlessly, driven by the need to earn more to send more home. I excelled at my job, rising to senior marketing manager. My boss offered me a huge promotion, heading up our new European division based in London. It was my dream job, but it would mean moving thousands of miles away. What if Dad had another episode? What if Mom needed me? The guilt, expertly stoked by my mother during our weekly calls. "Oh, London, how lovely. Of course, we'll miss you terribly, especially with your father needing so much care," was too much. I turned down the promotion, citing vague, quote, family health reasons. My boss was disappointed but understanding. I felt like a fool, but also strangely virtuous, the dutiful daughter, making the necessary sacrifice. This went on for 5 years. 5 years of sending money. 5 years of putting my own life on hold. 5 years of believing I was single-handedly keeping my family afloat and my father alive. I calculated it once. I had sent them close to $70,000, not including the countless loans to Mikey. My savings account was a joke. I had significant credit card debt from covering my own expenses during months when their emergencies were particularly demanding. I was 31, successful by any external measure, but living paycheck to paycheck in one of the most expensive cities in the world, all because of a narrative I never thought to question. Until I did. The unraveling began with a canceled flight. I was scheduled to fly home to Ohio for a long weekend, a visit my mother had been insisting on for weeks. "Your father misses you terribly." A massive blizzard hit the Midwest, grounding all flights. I was disappointed, but also secretly relieved. Visits home had become increasingly stressful, a tightrope walk between feigning cheerfulness and biting back frustrated questions about their finances. "Don't worry about it, honey," Mom said when I called to tell her I was stuck. "We're fine. Just rest up." 2 days later, The blizzard had passed, but the flight chaos lingered. Still unable to get a flight home, I was scrolling through Instagram on a lazy Sunday morning when a photo popped up that made my blood run cold. It was posted by Sarah, an old high school friend I occasionally kept in touch with. The photo showed a group of 4 men, grinning, holding golf clubs on a bright, sunny green. The caption read, asterisk, gorgeous day for hitting the links. So glad Dave talked us into playing, asterisk. One of those men, looking tanned, healthy, and absolutely beaming, was my father. I stared at the photo, my mind struggling to reconcile the image with the narrative I had been fed for 5 years. Fragile health? Barely able to leave the house? This man looked like he could run a damn marathon. He certainly looked healthy enough to play 18 holes of golf. My first thought was denial. Maybe it was an old photo. I checked the date, posted 1 hour ago. Maybe he was just having a good day, like Mom always said. But the casual joy in his expression, the easy camaraderie with his friends, it didn't look like a man carefully managing a chronic, life-threatening condition. It looked like a guy enjoying his retirement. A cold, sickening suspicion began to creep into my mind. I started scrolling back through Sarah's feed, and her husband Dave's, and there it was. More photos. Dad at a neighborhood barbecue 2 months ago, laughing, holding a beer. Dad at a local minor league baseball game last summer. Dad helping Dave build a deck last spring. Manual labor he supposedly couldn't handle. The evidence was circumstantial, yes, but it painted a picture drastically different from the one my mother had so carefully curated for me. I started with my extended family. Aunts, uncles, cousins who lived out of state, people who were somewhat removed from the immediate blast zone, but who had always been fed my parents' carefully curated image of the struggling but devoted family, caring for their sick patriarch and sensitive artist son. I didn't call with accusations. I framed it as seeking advice, sharing my shocking discovery. I emailed a few key relatives, the ones I knew were sensible and less likely to immediately jump to my parents' defense, attaching just a asterisk few, carefully selected photos from the ledger. A page showing my $1,000 income entry right next to expenses for Mikey, studio rent, and Mom spa day. Asterisk, I'm so confused and hurt. Asterisk, I wrote in the email. Asterisk, I've been sending money for 5 years believing it was for Dad's medical bills, but I just found this ledger. Can you make any sense of this? I feel like I'm going crazy. Asterisk, it was a calculated move. Presenting the evidence as a confusing discovery, rather than an angry accusation, allowed them to reach their own conclusions. And it worked. The outrage wasn't directed at me for causing trouble. It was directed for me, the victim of a long-term deception. My phone started ringing. My normally stoic Uncle Robert called, sputtering with rage. They what? They used Dad's illness to fund Mikey and spa days? I am going to call your father right now. No, Uncle Robert, please don't, I urged, sticking to my strategy. Not yet. I don't know what to do. I don't want to cause a huge family rift. A lie, of course. A rift was exactly what was needed. By letting the extended family simmer with this information, I was building a chorus of disapproval that would eventually reach my parents, making it harder for them to paint me as the villain. My next step was financial. I immediately stopped the automatic $1,000 monthly transfer. Then, I consulted with a financial advisor and a lawyer, specializing in elder financial abuse. Even though I wasn't elderly, the patterns of manipulation were similar. Based on their advice, I drafted a formal letter, sent via certified mail to my parents and Mikey. The letter was cold, clinical, and devastating. It laid out the facts. The 5 years of payments made under false pretenses, the evidence from the ledger proving the misuse of funds, the discovery of the secret investment account funded by my emergency contributions. It included copies of the most damning ledger pages and the brokerage statement. It formally demanded the immediate repayment of the full $70,000 I had sent over the 5 years, plus the return of the $20,000 personal loan I had taken out for Mikey's fictional surgical rotation, citing fraud and unjust enrichment. It gave them 60 days to respond with a concrete repayment plan. Failure to do so, the letter stated, would result in legal action, including potentially reporting the fraud to relevant authorities and seeking damages. I didn't mention Grandpa Joe's trust clause. That was my ace in the hole, to be played only if absolutely necessary. The certified letter landed like a bomb. My phone exploded. This time, it wasn't just my parents and Mikey. It was aunts, uncles, everyone caught in the crossfire. My parents, predictably, went into full victim mode, calling relatives, crying about how I was destroying them, how I was heartless and ungrateful. Mikey alternated between angry voicemails calling me a greedy bitch and pathetic texts begging for forgiveness and promising to, quote, pay me back someday. But my earlier groundwork had paid off. The extended family, already armed with the ledger evidence, wasn't buying their performance. My Uncle Robert apparently called my father and read him the riot act. My cousins started asking pointed questions about Mikey's art career and my parents' spending habits. The tide of family opinion, for the first time in my life, was turning against the golden child and his enablers. My parents and Mikey lawyered up, of course. Their lawyer sent back a blustering letter denying any deliberate deception, claiming the ledger entries were misinterpreted, and offering a good-faith gesture of a ridiculously small monthly repayment plan that would have taken approximately 150 years to clear the debt. My lawyer responded with a single sentence: "See you in court." That's when they finally blinked, facing the prospect of a public lawsuit, the exposure of their lies, and the very real possibility of criminal charges. My lawyer had subtly hinted at reporting the wire fraud. They caved. Their lawyer called back with a new offer. They would sell the secret investment account, worth about $160,000 by then, and use the proceeds to repay the full $90,000 immediately. In return, I would sign a non-disclosure agreement and agree not to pursue further legal action. It wasn't perfect. It didn't account for the interest I had paid on my own loan, or the lost investment potential of my savings, or the career opportunities I had sacrificed. But it was clean. It was final. And it was a clear, undeniable victory. "Take the deal, Megan," my lawyer advised. "It gets you whole financially, and it gets them out of your life cleanly. Sometimes, the best revenge is simply closing the door." I agreed. The paperwork was drawn up. The investment account was liquidated, and a check for $90,000 was deposited into my account. The exact amount they had systematically siphoned from me over 5 years, returned in one lump sum. It's been 6 months since the settlement check cleared. My life feels quiet. Not empty, just quiet. The constant background hum of anxiety about my family, the low-grade guilt about not doing enough, it's gone. Replacing it is a sense of calm, of control, that I haven't felt since childhood. I used the repaid money to pay off my own personal loan, and the lingering credit card debt I had accumulated while funding their lie. The rest went straight into a down payment fund for my own apartment, a dream I had deferred for far too long. Last week, my offer on a beautiful one-bedroom condo in Brooklyn was accepted. It's small, but it's mine, bought and paid for with my own hard work, finally reclaimed. My relationship with my parents and brother is non-existent. After the settlement, I sent them one final email. It wasn't angry or accusatory. It was just a simple statement of fact. Asterisk, the financial chapter between us is closed. The emotional one requires distance and boundaries I was never able to enforce before. For my own well-being, I need to step away. Do not contact me. I will reach out if and when I am ready. I blocked their numbers. I blocked their emails. I unfriended them on social media. It felt like severing a limb, painful but necessary for survival. I don't know if I will ever be ready to reach out. Maybe someday. Maybe never. What I know is that for the first time in my life, that decision is entirely mine. The extended family mostly understands. There are a few outliers who still cling to the family is family mantra, but most of them saw the evidence, heard the stories, and recognized the toxic dynamic I had finally escaped. They treat me with a newfound respect, a quiet acknowledgement of the strength it took to break the cycle. My dad's health, ironically, it seems to have genuinely improved now that the stress of maintaining the lie and managing Mikey is off his shoulders. He and my mom are apparently living a much more modest lifestyle, forced into the actual retirement budget they should have been on all along. Mikey, according to my cousin, finally moved out. Not into his own place, but onto a friend's couch. He's working part-time delivering pizzas. Maybe hitting rock bottom was the wake-up call he needed. Maybe not. Either way, it's no longer my responsibility to cushion his fall. Sometimes, I feel a pang of sadness for the family I wish I had. The supportive, loving unit I see in movies or in the lives of my friends. But then I remind myself that holding on to a fantasy is more damaging than accepting a difficult reality. My reality is that my biological family was incapable of providing the support and respect I deserved. So I had to build my own. My life now is focused on that construction. My career is thriving. I'm even back in the running for that London promotion. I have a wonderful circle of friends who value me for who I am, not what I can provide. I have my beautiful new apartment, filled with things love. And I have peace. A quiet, steady, hard-won peace. They thought they were just taking money. They didn't understand they were stealing my time, my energy, my future. They didn't understand that trust, once shattered, can rarely be perfectly pieced back together. They didn't understand that the, quote, responsible one, the quiet stagehand, eventually gets tired of watching the show from the wings, and decides to write her own damn script. And my new script? It doesn't include a role for them. It's a solo performance, and for the first time, I'm enjoying the spotlight.